And this is a really interesting piece in Quillette about Haverford College in Pennsylvania. Haverford College is one of these small liberal art colleges. They're $60,000 a year, right?
Huh. Yes, I'm aware.
Mm-hmm. Haverford College, 3.5% of the student body self-identify as conservative. 3% self-describe as transgender.
Nice. We barely nip out the people pretending to be the opposite sex.
And so it's interesting because, like everybody at a elite liberal arts school, the undergrads at Haverford College want to have the full college experience, meaning railing against imaginary wrongs. So they had some sort of school strike against systemic racism, except there's nobody to strike against because they're all on the same side. Right? So the students, the faculty, the administration are all trying to decry systemic racism each other. But this is really interesting, this observation about Haverford College and this dynamic of no one to protest against, because it disabuses people of, I think, a false premise they have. You hear a story about ridiculousness, screeching on the campus of Yale over a missive about Halloween costumes, or the lack of a missive about regulating Halloween costumes to make sure they're not culturally appropriating in nature, or all of the attack on Brett Weinstein at Evergreen State University. There's so many examples that we've gone over the years. And you say, who wants to pay $60,000 a year to send their kids to one of these schools?
Not me. I don't want to pay it.
Well, I
don't want to pay 43.
Well, there's a lot who do. And in point of fact, what we find out is people are getting exactly what they're paying for. Think about all of those hate has no home here sign waivers in the well-to-do leafy suburbs around Chicago and other metropolitan areas. And then think about where their offspring are attending post-secondary education, where they're getting their post-secondary education. This observation from this piece. When students complained about harm, they weren't really speaking up as activists denouncing racism on campus, since there doesn't seem to be much of it, but as consumers whose parents paid good money for them to experience the sensation of transgressive social justice heroism. As one told the author, normally the administrators are the perfect target for student transgression. They take the abuse and they're not supposed to push back. That's part of their role. That's what students expect. So, right, this self-indulgent, part of the psychic experience of going to a $60,000 a year liberal arts school, or even state schools, it's ubiquitous now, is to say, I want my opportunity to be a hero by standing up against wrongs that have nothing to do with my life.
It's ridiculous.
Decrying them. And you as the administrator, since there's nobody actually presenting any substantive disagreement, you as the administrator role play. And we go through this performative art routine where I'm the righteous protester and you're the man that I'm railing against. And we pay you $60,000 a year to have the kids enjoy this so that they're prepared to be in an HR department in a Fortune 500 company when they get out to actually implement this through diversity training or some other social justice warrior gambit.
You've just described college for the last half a century. The only difference is the number. That's the only thing that changes. It's always been a pretend existence, a phony life.
Well, it's not, but now what you have for over the last 50 years, I agree. That's the time frame. Now what you have is cultural Marxist activists who are the parents.
They're my favorite.
Passing on the cultural Marxism to their children. That's what's happening. So how did we get here? Because you start to have generational pileup of a particular ideology, and now they've built infrastructure. It's performance art, but they've built infrastructure that's underwritten by taxpayers to perpetuate it. It's really, really interesting piece that gets at gets at this from an angle I think most people don't see it. For more on the topic, we're pleased to be joined by somebody who does see it. He is Peter Wood, our friend from the National Association of Scholars, where he is the president. He has also written a response to the ahistorical 1619 project that we've spoken about quite a bit on this show. Their Pulitzer Prize for Nicole Hannah-Jones notwithstanding. His offering is 1620, a critical response to the 1619 project. And, of course, we just celebrated the 400-year anniversary of the Mayflower Compact of 1620 as well. So timely. Peter Wood, thanks so much for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me back.
Before we get to the 1619 project in your book, now what about that Haverford example, Haverford College example?
Well, I don't know if you know this, but I'm a Haverford alumnus, so I pay special attention to Quillette's long essay on it. But I can add something else. I went to college in the fall of 1971 at Haverford, and about 3 weeks into my first semester there, the Black Students Association at Haverford called a strike. It was a very odd kind of strike. They issued a single-page statement saying, "We're not going to tell you what our grievances are. Look to yourselves and you will know." And they took a vow of silence that they would not speak, no black student at Haverford would speak to any white person until their grievances were met. Now, I was just stunned by this. I arrived at college kind of, if I was anywhere politically, it was probably left-leaning, anti-war. At the end of this affair, I had redefined myself as what I've been ever since, as a conservative. What happened was that I witnessed my fellow students at Haverford in the fall of 71 descend into a incredible hysteria. Students were taking bed sheets and writing out things like "I am a racist" on them, and kind of in a Maoist fashion parading around campus declaring their guilt. After several days of this, perhaps it was a week, the administration called the whole student body together. That was 850 students at the time, put us in Roberts Hall, which was this unair-conditioned building. It was an Indian summer day, very hot. Under the consensus rules of Haverford's Quaker tradition, no one was allowed to leave the building until we had reached consensus. Consensus meant every single person had to agree. So for hours we sat there sweating as we were lectured on our inherent racism, including us freshmen who had never anything to do with Haverford racism or otherwise, and until we finally capitulated and said, yeah, we're all racist, we couldn't leave. When I did leave, my life had changed. I had seen what liberalism was all about. It wasn't about this sort of freedom of speech and thought and conscience that I had been led to think it was. It was about thought control and, to a certain degree, about the willingness to abuse official power to force your way on other people. So there, 1971, back here we are 50 years later, almost to the day. Haverford is replaying the events of 1971. I don't know, they intend to do this on a cycle in perpetuity. Maybe 50 years from now, they'll have another descent into madness. But that's all it is. It's an incredible display of the power of this anti-racist ideology.
As I'm listening to you talk, it is the Spanish Inquisition of the modern day. It is a religion. This neo-Marxist movement is not based on reason or thought or outcome. It's truly a religion of the people in it are serfs, and they must yield. I mean, you described torture. It is torture, and it's a scary reality, because instead of it going away and being rejected, it's been accepted and expanded. And I'm curious to know, can you recover, or must we all move to Chile, which I'm fine with because I look wonderful in a Speedo?
Can we recover? Well, I think we can, but a lot's going to depend on whether the election fraud can be pushed back. And that's certainly an open question at this point. So if we allow our country to be stolen in this fashion, I'm not sure that I would make any optimistic prediction of being able to recapture the culture or restore the rule of law.
Well, yeah, but I mean, the Haverford College example, I mean, your point of your experience as an undergrad is so poignant because it reminds people or informs people that what they've seen happening for the last few years has been underway for half a century. And it seems to me now we're in a place where the affluent are paying top dollar for the sort of experience you had at Haverford, the sort of experience that undergrads are having at Haverford today and in so many college campuses. And so I don't think you unwind that with a presidential election.
No, I don't think a presidential election alone would unwind it. I just think that we had better have a kind of reckoning with just how far the country has gone in the direction of being woke. And that reckoning maybe begins with recognition that our elections are phony.
What do you say? I mean, so to your book about 1620 and the response to the 1619 project, backed by the New York Times, backed by the Pulitzer Foundation, all sorts of accolades for Nikole Hannah-Jones, even as she's criticized by respected historians across the ideological spectrum in academia. So do you see that pushback that she's receiving, the critiques, including your book, that are being well received, as changing the course of the 1619 project curriculum, making its way into K through 12 school systems, continuing to being embraced by big media and thus the premier colleges?
No, not yet. I think there's a chance that we can succeed in pushing it back. The Times, I think, was humiliated when its fact checker came forward some months ago and said, I warned them that this was false history, and they ignored me. And they were humiliated again when it was discovered by my colleague Phil Magnus that they had been stealth editing, going back and changing the 1619 project text without telling anybody that they were making corrections. And humiliated a third time when Bret Stephens, one of their own columnists, lashed out with a 3,000-word essay basically saying that people like me were right, that this project was riddled with historical errors and was a matter of shame to the New York Times' reputation that they had put it forward and stood behind it so ardently for so long. So there are cracks in the facade, but the Pulitzer Center that is promoting this 1619 curriculum in our schools across the country hasn't budged an inch. They're working with the Howard Zinn Center and with several other left-wing organizations to get this into our schools. The effort to push back against that has so far not amounted to very much. We need clearly to begin to elect school boards and get parental involvement in opposition to this stuff. I don't think that there's been a great wave of parental umbrage at seeing our entire history curriculum hijacked and replaced with a critical race theory approach to the past.
And it seems like one of the other things that could happen to provide more momentum is, as you see parents rethinking their K through 12 choices for their kids, parents perhaps and undergrads rethinking their collegiate choices. Maybe the impetus was they're not on campus, they're not in class, they're not getting value for their dollar, but it can be blown up and be larger than that to say, well, I'm going to choose a Hillsdale College, a University of Dallas, a Grove City College instead of a Haverford or Yale or Northwestern.
I think some of that is happening. Clearly, the whole world of higher education is in turmoil. The shutdown didn't work well for them. The finances of American higher education are in shambles, and they're hoping against hope that Biden will give them a massive bailout. But short of that, I think, yes, there is an awakening on the part of a substantial number of parents and students that going to the elite liberal arts colleges and major universities is no longer a very good investment, the bet that this is just going to give them a credential that will lead seamlessly to a good job. It turns out to be much riskier than people had supposed, and the realization that the education they're getting is turning more and more into just outright indoctrination is beginning to sink in.
Although they're mutually exclusive, the 1619 Project, which is basically made up, it's a lie, it's a fraud, it's a cheat, to steer and to get an outcome. The election, the voting, the numbers that came in from where we went to bed and from where we woke up is, I think, apparently a lie, a fraud, and a cheat. There has been an acceptance and a push for society in America to have this collective acceptance of lying, of cheating, to where it's justified somewhere. Well, it may be not true, but the outcome we seek is righteous. I am extremely troubled with that. Do you see people rejecting it, or in your opinion, are they just becoming numb to the fraud?
I think that the numbness is definitely there. I'm not a pollster. I can't put my thumb on the pulse here that says how many Americans fall in which direction or another. I think the vote turnout for Trump was enormous. It's even understated to this point, and Biden probably got a small fraction of the votes that are being attributed to him. Yet the mainstream media are all in about, we just have to accept this, we've got to move on. There are a discouraging number of Republican elected officials who seem to be ready to make peace with this. But how is the general public taking it? I know a lot of people like myself who are outraged at what's happening. We're kind of an intellectual fringe, perhaps. I don't know where the mainstream of America is on this. I think probably as a radio host, you have better idea of public sentiment than I do. If I could move public sentiment towards outrage right now, that would be my highest priority.
He is Peter Wood, President of the National Association of Scholars. The book, 1620, A Critical Response to the 1619 Project. Peter, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Bye-bye.
He joined us on the Turnkey.pro answer line.
It's news, opinion, insight. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
I'm Dan Proft.
And I'm Amy Jacobson. And if you're a small business owner or you make the marketing or advertising decisions for a business, then listen up. Once again, our annual Food for the Poor campaign is underway to raise money to feed families in Latin America who are suffering because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Our friends at Food for the Poor are working with partners on the ground at feeding centers to provide emergency food relief. And here's how your business can be part of the solution.
Become a Food for the Poor business benefactor. Just make a $2,500 tax-deductible donation to Food for the Poor, and AM 560 will give you 40 60-second commercials to air here on AM 560 The Answer between 5 a.m. and 8 p.m. Monday